All right, so for Unit 1, we are going to be reviewing some grade 9 math just to make sure that we have everything fresh in our minds before moving on to grade 10 math. So the first thing that we're going to be covering is order of operations, which is the acronym BEDMAS, which we'll come back to, as well as going over just some number sense in general. So the first thing that we talk about is integers. These are essentially any positive or negative whole number is the key here. From the set of -1, 0, 1, 2, this means it continues on to infinity. Same thing as over here. It goes on to infinity as long as it is a positive or negative number, and this includes 0. Now, when we are adding and subtracting integers, we are always going to simplify the double sign and then solve. What double sign means is if I had, say, 7 minus -2, this double sign simplifies to a positive because this is essentially the same as saying -1 times -2. And one thing to keep in mind is when we are multiplying and dividing negatives and positives, a positive times a positive will always give you a positive value. A positive times a negative will always give you a negative value, which is the same over here. And then a negative and a negative always gives you a positive value. Now, if the signs are the same, what you are going to do is add the two numbers together and then take the sign. So say I had +7 plus 2. It's 7 plus 2 is 9, and it's positive because they're both positive. If I had, say, for example, -6 minus 3, what I'm going to do is add the two numbers together. 6 plus 3 is 9, and I'm going to take the negative sign. So it will be -9. Now, if the signs are opposite, this is if we have a positive and a negative number being added or subtracted together, we are going to subtract the two numbers from each other and then take the sign of the integer with the largest absolute value, which just means drop the sign. So +8, absolute value is just 2 bars beside it, is equal to 8. -9, absolute value is equal to 9. So in this case, -9 would have a larger absolute value than +8 would. And now if we move on and we look at some examples, we will start off with example 1. So example 1 gives us +6 minus 12. We have a positive and a negative, so these signs are opposite. So I'm going to subtract the two values. I've got 12 minus 6 is going to give me 6, and then take the sign of the integer with the largest absolute value. -12 has an absolute value of 12, 6 has an absolute value of 6, so -12 is the larger one, and that means we have a -6 for our sign. Now I'm just going to move this stuff over. If we look at the second example, I have -7 plus 11. So again, I'm going to subtract the two numbers. 11 minus 7 is going to give me 4. And then I want to take a look. +11 has an absolute value of 11. -7 has an absolute value of 7. +11 has the greater absolute value. So that means that it is going to be +4. Now, when we are multiplying and dividing integers, if there is an even number of negative signs, then the answer is always going to be positive. Again, because if we look back to the little chart we made here, a negative times a negative gives me a positive. If I did that a second time, so let's say I have 4 negative numbers, a negative times a negative gives me a positive, and a positive times a positive gives me a positive. So if we take a look here, we have the example -2 times -3 times -2 times -10. And even if I show you this by doing it in multiple steps, we would have -2 times -3 gives me +6. That would be +6 times -2 times -10. +6 times -2 is going to give me -12. So it'd be -12 times -10, and -12 times -10 is again going to give me a positive, and in this case it will be 120. So my final answer will be +120. Now, when I'm multiplying or dividing, if there's an odd number of negative signs, then my answer is going to be negative. So if we use the same process just to prove it, and you would not have to show all this work on a test, it's just so I can show you where that math comes from. I have in this case a -2 and a -3, which is going to give me a +6. So my answer here is going to be 6 times 10 over -2. My next step that I'm going to go to is 6 times 10 gives me again a positive because it's a positive times a positive. 60 over -2. And remember, this is treated as division. 60 divided by -2. Now I have an odd number again. So a negative times a positive is a negative, and that will give me -30. And if I look here, I have 1, 2, 3 negative signs. So an odd negative equals a negative value. So now if we look at order of operations, this is where we get back into BEDMAS, which is just telling us the order of mathematical operations and how they must be done. This ensures that we all get to the same exact answer in the end. There's no question about which math is right and which math is wrong. Just in case you do not remember, the acronyms here is B stands for brackets, E is for exponents, D is for division, M is for multiplication, A is for addition, and S is for subtraction. Now, the only catch here is that when I have division and multiplication, so this step goes first, this step goes second, this step goes third. Division and multiplication occur in the same step, so they happen in the same step. But when you do this, say you have an answer that's 4 times 2 times 3, you know you're just going to multiply across the line. If it was 3 divided by 2 times 4, we're not necessarily going to go in the order of division then multiplication. We are going to use the left to right order. So just read across your page from left to right. Same exact thing happens with addition and subtraction. These happen in the same step, and it's the same exact thing. When they happen in the same step, we are just going to read from left to right so that this way we all get the same answer. So let's do an example here that we have of that. This is just the color coding that I will use just so you can see where each step comes from. So the first step that I'm going to look at is example 1. Do I have brackets? Yes, so I'm going to go through that first. I've got 3, and then my brackets come up. The only thing I have in my brackets is a subtraction, so I'm just going to do that and not worry about the rest. If there was multiple operations within the brackets, then you would just, again, follow BEDMAS. But I have 6 minus 2 is 4, that's still squared, plus 9 divided by 3. So what I'm going to end up doing here is showing each order of the operations that we go through, and then just keeping everything else in the equation the same when I rewrite it. If I take a look at exponents, I do have exponents, which is now going to be my step 2. 3 times 4 to the power of 2 gives me 16 plus 9 divided by 3. Now I'm going to take a look. I do have division and multiplication, and this time I'm just going to move from left to right because I have both multiplication and division. And whenever you see a number here beside brackets, that just means multiply the two together instead of us writing the multiplication sign. Same thing as when you see something like 4 over 2. This is to divide the same way that 2 brackets side by side is to multiply. It's just going to be 3 times 16 is 48 plus 9 divided by 3 is 3. Oops, that is supposed to be a 48. So now when I take a look, I also have addition and subtraction, and that's just in this case, just addition. So 48 plus 3 is 51, which is my final answer. So now if we go over to example 2, I don't have any brackets, so I don't have to worry about that. I don't have any exponents, so I don't have to worry about that. I do have multiplication though, so my first step is going to be 5 minus 2 times 3 is going to be -6 plus 1. And then my last step is I do have addition and subtraction. So I have 2. So I'm going to go from left to right. 5, just going to erase that so it doesn't look like an equal sign. 5 minus 6 is -1 plus 1, which is 0. And just so you know, for future reference, this is equal to a 0, and this would be alphabet. So this would just represent an O in the alphabet. This would represent a 0. Awesome. So now we're just going to go on. I'm going to put up my color coding again so you still have it, and do 2 more examples. So in this example over here, we have one that looks a little bit easier. I don't have brackets. Well, I do here, but there's nothing to do within them. So this is just going to signify multiplication. I don't have any exponents. I do have multiplication. So it's going to be 100 minus 6 times 3 is going to be 18. So my overall one is going to give me 100 minus 18, which is equal to 82. And that will be our final answer. So I do have addition and subtraction, and I do have multiplication and addition. Now, if I look here, I do have brackets for example 4. So my first step is 4 times 5 minus 3 is 2 squared minus 6 times 2. I do have exponents, so 4 times 4, because 2 to the power of 2 is 4, minus 6 times 2. I do have multiplication and division, so I have 4 times 4 is 16, minus 6 times 2 is 12, and I do have addition and subtraction, which is 16 minus 12 should give me 4. So my final answer is 4, and that will be a positive 4. Now, when we look at the division bar, it is considered both a grouping and a division. So for instance, every time I have something written as a fraction, say I had 4 plus 2 minus 3 over 6 times 8. This represents division. Now, it also acts to group it. So although we don't see brackets, you would imagine brackets up here and brackets down here, which means based on BEDMAS, we are going to do everything in the brackets up top and everything in the brackets at the bottom before we try and divide anything. So if we look at our first example, I have 2 brackets up here, and I do have them down here as well. Now, once we are inside the brackets, we have to follow BEDMAS. So I can see within those brackets, I don't have brackets anymore, but I do have exponents. So that means this one is going to be -5 times 3 minus 6 times -2 all over 3 to the power of 3 is 27, divided by 3 to the power of 2 is 9. That is one where you are allowed to use your calculator for that. The more you do it, the better you get at doing it in your head, though, which can always be helpful. Now, I do have division and multiplication. I have it here, here, and here. So I do have that. So inside my brackets, I have -5 times 3 is -15 minus, -6 times -2 is +12 over 27 divided by 9 is going to give me 3. And my last step is I do have addition and multiplication. So I have here 15 minus 12 is going to give me 3. And it's going to be negative because I have opposite numbers. So it will be -3 over 3. I have a negative number divided by a positive number. In this case, I'm now just popping back up to division and multiplication. So it will still give me a negative. 3 divided by 3 is 1. So my final answer is -1. If I take a look over here, I again have brackets all the time. I also have brackets here. So, and that means I'm going to have to do those first too. The first step that I have is 100 minus 120. I apparently really want to draw brackets. 4 minus 9 is going to give me -5, but that's squared, goes off my top bracket. In the bottom, I have -10 squared. I do have exponents both here and here. So that means I did have brackets. I do have exponents, which is my next step. I will get 100 minus 120. -5 squared is the same as -5 times -5. So it's going to be a positive value and give me 25. All over -10 times -10 is 100, and it's going to give me a positive value because it's two negative signs. Now I do have multiplication, so this is going to be 100 minus 120 times 25. And this is still going to be -3,000 over 100. I'm going to go to adding and subtraction because I do have that. And 100 minus 3,000 is going to give me -2,900 over 100. And my last step is to pop back up to division because now we have finished those upper and lower brackets. And this is going to give me -29. Awesome, and that is the end for lesson 1.